Have you ever wondered why some women seem completely unforgettable no matter what they do? Not because they were the loudest in the room or the most beautiful by conventional standards, but because there was something different, something unshakable. You could feel it. The way they entered a room quiet, but commanding. The way they looked at the world like they knew a secret the rest of us had forgotten. What if I told you there's one thing, just one, that changes everything? It's not about what you wear. It's not about what you say. It's the moment you choose yourself, fully, without flinching. That moment doesn't just live in memory, it echoes, and he will never forget it. This could be the moment everything shifts for you. Stay with me. What you're about to discover isn't just a story, it's a reflection of the woman you're becoming. You've been told to be quiet, agreeable, pretty, available, but never powerful. Why? It starts early, doesn't it? You're praised when you smile, rewarded when you're polite, corrected when you speak too boldly, and shamed when your emotions rise too high. Somewhere along the way, you learned how to shrink yourself without anyone having to say a word. You made yourself easy to love at the cost of being truly known. There's a woman I once worked with. Let's call her Claire. Claire was the kind of woman people described as having it all together. Her hair was always smooth, her outfits always tasteful. She laughed at the right moments. She brought gluten-free brownies to every office gathering. Men liked her. Women admired her. She did everything she was told would make her lovable. But behind her polished surface, Claire was exhausted, not just tired, spiritually empty. She told me once, in a quiet voice that barely cracked above a whisper, "I feel invisible in my own life." That hit me hard. Maybe you know that feeling too. Carl Jung called it the shadow self, the parts of you that society teaches you to hide. Your anger, your sensuality, your wildness, your untamed opinions. The inconvenient brilliance that doesn't ask for permission. Instead, you're taught to become digestible, palatable, sweet enough to swallow. You learn to edit your instincts, dilute your presence, and defer your truth just to be liked. But here's the secret they never taught you. What if the very thing you were told to suppress is the key to your deepest power? Let that sink in. What if your silence isn't grace, it's self-betrayal? What if your ability to keep the peace is costing you your peace? What if the things you think make you good are the very chains keeping you from being unforgettable? You see, when a woman chooses to reclaim her shadow, something ancient stirs. There's a fire that ignites not in rage, but in remembrance. She begins to walk differently, speak differently, not louder, necessarily, but with a gravity that makes others listen. She no longer seeks approval. She no longer asks for space. She becomes the space. And that kind of woman, a man doesn't forget her, not because she pleased him, but because she awakened something in him he didn't know he was missing. She doesn't perform, she reveals. She doesn't strive, she chooses. She doesn't beg to be chosen. She knows she's already enough. So let me ask you something personal, and I don't mean it rhetorically. What part of you have you been hiding just to be accepted? The part that gets angry, the part that desires more, the part that knows something isn't right, but has stayed quiet for years. That's not a weakness. That's your buried truth. That's your compass. When you keep that part locked away, it doesn't just disappear. It turns inward. It starts to erode your confidence, chip away at your joy, whisper lies that you're too much or not enough. And eventually, you forget what your real voice even sounds like. But here's what's wild: when you stop hiding, you stop apologizing for taking up space. And when you stop apologizing, you start becoming unforgettable. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but in a soul-deep, heart-sure, I know who I am kind of way. And that kind of presence, it lingers. He may not understand it. He may not be able to explain why, but he will feel it in the silence, in the spaces where you used to over-explain, over-give, over-function, and he will never forget the moment you stopped reaching for validation and started reaching inward. Because something shifts when a woman reclaims her wholeness. She becomes a mirror, and he is forced to see himself clearly, for better or worse. That's why this isn't about manipulation. This isn't about tactics or tricks. This is about truth. And truth, when embodied by a woman who no longer fears herself, leaves an imprint. So if you felt like you're carrying a weight, no one sees if you've shaped yourself into a version of acceptable that no longer fits. Know this. You're not alone, and you're not broken. You're just beginning to remember, and he will never forget the woman who chose to meet her shadow and didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't explain herself. She just stood still and everything shifted. Her name was Elise, not someone you'd immediately notice in a crowd. She didn't wear red lipstick or command attention with dramatic flair. No. Elise had a quiet kind of power, the kind that simmers just beneath the surface, the kind people overlook until it's too late to forget. For most of her life, Elise was the peacemaker, the one who made sure everyone felt heard, accommodated, comfortable. She mastered the art of small talk, of holding her tongue, of smiling when she didn't mean it. She was what many would call nice. But there was one problem: she was tired of being nice. The moment came unexpectedly. She was sitting across from someone who had made her question her worth for too long. Someone who had dangled affection like a prize she hadn't quite earned. And instead of pushing back, instead of defending herself, Elise simply stopped. She leaned back, met his gaze, and said nothing. Not out of fear, not out of confusion, but out of complete clarity. He asked, "Aren't you going to say anything?" She didn't. She just looked at him. And in that stillness, something powerful happened. He realized he had no power over her anymore. It wasn't the words she used. It wasn't a clever comeback or a grand declaration. It was her presence, her unapologetic, undiluted, unbothered presence. Have you ever felt your soul burn when you silenced yourself just to keep the peace? That ache, that tightening in your chest when you swallow your truth? That's your inner wisdom knocking. It's not asking for attention. It's asking for release. Sometimes, the most unforgettable thing you'll ever do is not react. You won't scream. You won't cry. You won't try to convince him to see you, understand you, love you better. You'll simply choose yourself and let the silence speak what words never could. And yes, it may look small from the outside, like declining a second date you would have once accepted just to feel chosen, like not responding to a message that treats your time like it's disposable, like smiling politely, but no longer feeling the need to laugh at a joke that's rooted in disrespect. But those are not small moments. They are seismic shifts. They are the moments you stop living for someone else's comfort and start living in your own truth. And whether he realizes it in the moment or not will remember, because your energy has changed, your alignment has shifted, and your approval is no longer up for sale. That's the thing about intentional presence. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't beg to be noticed. It's felt. You've likely felt it before in the room with a woman who says very little, but radiates something undeniable. There's no striving in her, no performance, just a grounded knowing. She is not there to impress. She is not there to prove. She is there because she belongs, and that knowing is magnetic. That is the kind of woman who is unforgettable, not because she demands attention, but because her attention is sovereign. She chooses where it goes, and when she chooses to leave, to stop explaining, to stop over-giving, her absence echoes louder than any speech. That is the moment he remembers, because it forces him to confront something, his own reflection in your stillness, the fact that he no longer has access to a version of you that once tolerated less than you deserved. Elise never told him off. She didn't post about it. She didn't need a revenge arc. She simply stopped trying to be what he needed and became what she needed. And that choice, that one unapologetic moment, became a turning point, not just in their story but in hers. So now I ask you, gently but clearly, what would happen if you chose presence over approval? What would open up if you stopped shrinking, stopped softening your edges, stopped adjusting your volume to match the room? What would it feel like to let your energy lead, not your explanation? He will never forget the woman who stood still, not because she was frozen, but because she was rooted, because she knew that stillness isn't weakness, It's power in its purest form. You don't need to say more. You don't need to justify your boundaries, your silence, your leaving, your returning to yourself. You just need to remember this. Sometimes, the most powerful move you'll ever make is not making one at all. Perfection is a cage wrapped in compliments. You're so put together. You're so nice. You're so easy to be around. Sound familiar? From the time you were a little girl, you were likely taught how to be good, not real, not whole, not bold, just likable. The kind of girl who doesn't interrupt. The kind of woman who doesn't challenge. The kind of partner who doesn't make him feel small. But here's the part no one talks about. The more perfect you become, the less alive you feel. And that's exactly how they built the lie. It doesn't come with chains or shackles. It comes with smiles, praise, and quiet nods of approval. The perfect woman is rewarded at every step for her grace, for her patience, for her ability to hide the storm in her gut behind a perfectly polite smile. But make no mistake, this perfection is performance. And performance is exhausting. Let me tell you about a woman named Lena. On the outside, she was what they call high value. The perfect resume, the perfect wardrobe, the perfect smile. She said the right things, never rocked the boat, never asked for more than what was offered. People admired her composure. But Lena wasn't composed. She was compressed. Inside, she was screaming, not in chaos, but in longing. Not for attention, but for truth. She couldn't remember the last time she had felt fully expressed, fully alive, fully her. One night, alone in her apartment, Lena stood in front of the mirror, wearing a white dress she had bought years ago for someone else's approval. It was beautiful. It was elegant. It was everything she had been told she should be. And she hated it, not because of how it looked, but because of what it represented. The white dress was a symbol of the girl who tried to be pleasing, of the woman who said yes when she meant maybe, of the softness that wasn't her own, of the quiet that didn't come from peace, but from fear. So she did something wild. She took the dress, walked outside, and burned it. Not out of anger, but out of liberation. As the fabric turned to ash, so did the expectations, the rules, the lies, the story that she had to be less, softer, smaller to be loved. She cried not because she was sad, but because for the first time, she felt free. That's what individuation is. Jung described it as the process of becoming who you really are, not who the world asked you to be. It's not rebellion for rebellion's sake. It's the unshackling of the soul. It's peeling off the layers of conditioning until the woman underneath finally breathes. You can't be unforgettable if you're busy being acceptable. You can't be powerful if you're addicted to being pleasing. And you will never feel fully loved if the person being loved is a mask. So let me ask you something that might sting a little. What lies are keeping you small? Maybe it's the belief that being too ambitious makes you unattractive. Maybe it's the voice that says asking for more makes you ungrateful. Maybe it's the fear that if you truly showed all of you, your fire, your flaws, your desire, she'd walk away. But here's the truth. Most people don't have the courage to say out loud, the right man doesn't want your performance. He wants your presence. He doesn't want the woman who never makes mistakes. He wants the woman who owns them, learns from them, and keeps evolving. He doesn't fall in love with perfection. He falls in love with aliveness, and aliveness is messy, unpredictable, wildly real. There's something unforgettable about a woman who refuses to shrink, not because she's trying to be intimidating, but because she's done editing herself to be digestible. And when that moment comes, when you stop performing and start being, you'll feel it in your bones. The breath comes easier. The laugh gets louder. The walk becomes steadier. You're not trying anymore. You're just existing, fully. And in that existence, you light up. You radiate. You remember. And he will remember too. Not because you said the perfect thing. Not because you looked flawless under candlelight. But because you carried something rare truth. Raw and unfiltered. The kind of truth that doesn't flinch. The kind of truth that won't apologize. The kind of truth that burns away everything that isn't real. So, if you've been living in the myth of the perfect woman, if you've been clinging to the compliments that keep you caged, I want you to hear me now. You don't owe the world perfection. You owe yourself wholeness. And the moment you choose it, the moment you pick fire over facadas, the moment you become unforgettable, because he will never forget the woman who stopped trying to be what he wanted and became who she was always meant to be. Sometimes, the most unforgettable thing you do is walk away without a sound. No drama, no slammed doors, no emotional pleas or final speeches, just stillness. Her name was Mira. She had given it everything: her patience, her softness, her effort. She was the one who remembered his mother's birthday, who stayed when things got hard, who forgave the silences that started to stretch too long. Mira wasn't weak, she was devoted. But one day, something inside her shifted. Not all at Oncino lightning bolt, no breaking point, just a quiet recognition. He wasn't choosing her. Not really. He liked her comfort. He leaned on her strength. But he didn't see her. Not in the way a woman longs to be seen, not with reverence, not with presence. And so, without tears or accusation, she left. She packed her things with grace, smiled at him gently, and walked out the door. She didn't leave a note. She didn't post a cryptic message. She didn't seek closure. She was the closure. And that silence, it haunted him. Not because she punished him, but because she didn't need to. She wasn't loud, but the silence she left behind roared through him. You see, when a woman walks away without begging to be heard, it forces a reckoning, because men expect the storm, the meltdown, the chaos, the dramatic goodbye followed by a hopeful return. But when the woman becomes still, truly still, it's a different kind of power. That's the energy of a woman who knows who she is, a woman who no longer explains her worth, a woman who has returned to herself. And there's nothing louder than her quiet exit. Why? Because her silence isn't emptiness, it's clarity. She doesn't leave to punish. She leaves because her soul is done whispering and she's ready to listen. And when that kind of woman exits, she doesn't just leave the room, she shifts the energy of it. She doesn't have to say, "You'll miss me." He already does. In the absence of her over-giving, over-justifying, over-accommodating, the truth settles in like dust after a quake. That's when he starts remembering. The way she looked at him with depth, not performance. The way she gave, not out of desperation, but out of abundance. The way she stood beside him, not beneath him. But it's too late. She's gone now to be cruel, but to be whole. This kind of woman isn't one-dimensional. She isn't here to fit a mold. She's an embodiment of something far more ancient, far more powerful. She is archetypal. And that's where it gets deeper, because every woman carries within her a constellation of archetypes, energies that live beneath the surface. You may recognize them as whispers in your bones, or longings you can't quite explain. The goddess. She knows her body is sacred. Her presence is art. She moves with slow, sensual authority, untouched by comparison. The healer. She listens with her soul. She sees wounds that words don't reveal. Her compassion isn't weakness, it's sacred medicine. The warrior. She doesn't flinch at fire. She's walked through darkness and emerged with boundaries made of steel and a heart still soft. The muse. She inspires without effort. She creates beauty, not to be praised, but because it is her nature to bring life into form. These aren't roles you play. They are parts of you that awaken when you stop living on autopilot, when you stop reaching for approval and start reclaiming your essence. So ask yourself, softly and honestly, which archetype do you feel awakening in you now? Is it the part of you that's tired of dimming your light? Or the part that's done mothering everyone except yourself? Or maybe it's the part that longs to create, not because it'll be perfect, but because you were born to express. Whatever it is, trust it, because that's the part of you he can't forget. That's the part of you that lingers, not the one that chased, or adjusted, or proved, but the one that knows. The truth is, your silence has never been empty. It has always been full of wisdom, power, and remembrance. You don't need to seduce him. You don't need to explain your evolution. You don't need to soften what has become sharpened by experience. You only need to stand in the quiet knowing that you've chosen yourself. That kind of silence is a thunderclap in the soul of any man who once took your presence for granted. Because when you leave without needing to be right, without hoping to be chased, without trying to be remembered, you already are. And he will never forget the woman who didn't just leave but who rose, silently, into her own myth. There's one thing a man never forgets: a woman who met herself and refused to flinch, not because she was flawless, not because she played the part, but because she finally stopped playing altogether. She looked herself in the Murano filters, no distractions, and stayed. She didn't look away. She didn't back down. She met her fears, her fire, her forgotten edges, and chose them anyway. That moment is unforgettable, not just to him but to you. You've spent years, maybe even decades, becoming who the world needed you to be. Pleasant, supportive, attractive, but not too assertive. Smart but not too outspoken. You learned to read a room before you read your own soul. You became fluent in everyone else's expectations, and somewhere along the way, you forgot your native language, your truth. But here's what no one teaches you. The moment you choose yourself over the mask, the game changes. It's subtle at first. You stop laughing at jokes that make you feel small. You stop saying, "It's fine," when it's not. You start dressing, speaking, moving not for attention, but from intention. You start showing up as you. And that's the one thing he can't unsee. Because while the world asked for her mask, she handed them her fire. And fire isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a steady burn, a knowing in her walk, a quiet refusal in her eyes, a soft no that holds more power than 1,000 yeses. That kind of woman doesn't need to prove. She simply is. She's not performing. She's remembering. And the truth is, we all remember her. Maybe it was the woman who walked into the room and didn't try to impress but somehow lit it up. Maybe it was the woman who turned down the relationship that looked perfect on paper because it didn't feel like truth in her bones. Or the one who chose solitude over settling, not because she wanted to be alone, but because she refused to abandon herself ever again. That kind of woman lingers in a man's mind, not as a regret, but as a reckoning. Because when he sees her choose herself, it challenges everything he thought love was supposed to look like. It's no longer about being pleased. It's about being met. And if he can't meet her there, he will remember the moment he saw her rise. So, now I ask you, are you willing to become unforgettable by being fully yourself? Are you willing to stop chasing love and start embodying it? Are you ready to stop explaining your intuition to people who've never honored their own? Are you ready to take back the parts of you that got lost in the pleasing, the proving, the perfecting? This isn't about being remembered by him. It's about you remembering you. The you before the world got its hands on you, before you were told your power was too much, before you were taught to shrink to stay safe, before your softness was misunderstood as weakness and your truth mistaken for rebellion. Because the truth is, you were never broken. You were just buried, under layers of performance, under the need for approval, under the weight of what a good woman is supposed to be. But now you're remembering. And that's the moment everything changes. You walk differently. You speak differently. You no longer need someone to pick you because you already did. And here's the part that most people don't realize. Choosing yourself is not selfish. It's sacred. It's what makes you magnetic. Not the kind of magnetism that begs for attention, but the kind that draws in what's real and repels what's false. Because once you meet yourself fully, you no longer entertain what dishonors her. And if a man sees that truly sees either, may not know what to do with it, but he will not forget it. Because he's not just watching you become someone, he's watching you return to someone. You, not the curated version, not the people pleaser, not the echo of someone else's ideal. The woman who chose her own voice, her own pace, her own depth. So if this stirred something in you, don't look away from it. Let it rise. Let it crack you open. Let it whisper reminders of the parts you thought you had to hide. You don't. You are allowed to be the whole damn fire, not just the candlelight others can control. Because in the end, what makes you unforgettable isn't your beauty, your charm, or your perfection. It's the fact that you came home to yourself and refused to flinch. This isn't about one man. This is about the moment you chose to stop disappearing. You've spent enough time dimming your light, biting your tongue, bending yourself to be more wanted, more likable, more safe. But slowly, one quiet choice at a time, you began to shift. You stopped apologizing for your needs. You stopped trying to be understood by people committed to misunderstanding you. And most of all, you stopped waiting for permission to be your whole self. This was never about him. The one thing he never forgot was the moment you remembered who you were. Because once you do, you don't shrink back. You rise, again and again, not to prove, but to embody. You walk through the world as a woman who chooses herself, fully and without flinching. That's what makes you unforgettable. So if this stirred something in you, don't silence it. Leave a comment about your moment. Share this with a woman who's ready to stop apologizing for her fire. And subscribe if you're walking this path too, because you're not alone. Your voice matters. Your presence is enough. And the world is ready for all of you.